Thank you. I expect there will be a challenge to that on the basis of how long the meeting took this morning, but that's what it is. Right, okay, welcome to the Special Performance Review and Scrutiny Quarterly Reports. Any apologies?
The Councillor Milligan and Councillor Baxter.
Okay, order of business is as per the agenda. Any declarations of interest? No? Okay, then we'll move straight on to performance reports, and the first is health and social care. Alison?
Thank you, Chair. I will just highlight a few of the key issues that I think of particular interest for you. I mean, integration, a number of you are already aware of what's happening in terms of the integrated service and the partnership shadow board. It's now met 3 times. They're still in that formation period at this point in time, and there's a lot of training and development work that's happening and sharing of information, but that seems to be going along really positively at this point in time. The joint management team has been developed and is working very closely together to develop some strong links, and we're about to widen that out to include third-tier managers to ensure that across the whole range of areas that we're working in, we're getting much stronger links in terms of development. Good examples about that, about how we're doing some of our winter planning this year, and much more joined-up approach between ourselves and NHS. In terms of older people, I've mentioned before about the development of a single service for dementia. We hope to have that up and running in January. That will be co-located in Bodyrig Health Centre. The team leader, we are recruiting to that. The interviews are next week. We've got some strong candidates from both health and social care for that post. So co-located, multi-professional team that will be up and running from the new year with clear care pathways, and there's been a really good user and carer reference group that has been involved in terms of shaping how we will support people moving forward. It's not included in this, but also to say that we have been successful as to extend our status as dementia demonstrator to introduce the 8 pillars that Alzheimer's Scotland has been putting forward as a suggestion for how we support people with dementia. So we've got funding for a further 2 years to implement that, and that will have some impact in Kevin's service as well, as that's focusing a lot on some of the housing developments. Frailty as well, we've got money from NHS Lothian to develop our rapid response service. Again, it's to enhance what we're already providing. We've got money for geriatrician to be community-based, some advanced nursing practitioners, other AHPs, and can enhance the service that we've got. That's very much with a focus about trying to prevent hospital admissions in the first place and support people at home in their own community, but it is also about enhancing the work we're already doing about getting people out of hospital as quickly as we can. Learning disabilities, again, in terms of integration, there's been some good work that's been going on across Lothian to look at what integration might mean for learning disability services, both what we still need to do on a Lothian-wide basis and what we can focus on in the locality to improve services for people with learning disabilities. We should have some proposals by the early of next year, but there's been some really good work going on across the 5 agencies that are involved to look at how we can improve services and what the opportunities we're given through integration. We have started a new local day service for younger people. A lot of the referrals we were getting through to us that were coming through transition were that our existing services within Middle Lothian were focused on people who were too old, and the 16, 17-year-olds that were leaving school didn't really want to go to Cherry Road, and they didn't want to go to the community access team. We've developed a specific service around some of the younger people. That started in October. It's actually based at Vaugree Country Park. It's currently only running for 2 days a week, but we hope to expand that as things move on. But it seems to be very successful so far. And we're also doing some work to look at a new housing development. Papers have already come forward, so we're fleshing out that to look at a new housing development for young people with very complex care support needs. Carers, we've got a really robust carers strategy. Just worth to highlight that the new carers centre has now opened up at Harden Green in Dalkeith. It's a fantastic resource, a great looking building, really could be able to offer some great opportunities to support carers in our locality. Sensory impairment, we have some money that has come into us to look at developing a much stronger local strategy for people with sensory impairment. At the moment it's included as part of our physical disability strategy, but we're very much looking at developing something to be far more specific for people with sensory impairment, so that will be coming up very shortly. And within mental health, worth highlighting the fantastic work that we've been doing for quite a period of time across health, the council and the voluntary sector, particularly if we look at things like the Orchard Centre, and they had their 21st anniversary, which was a great event that was really well received. And I think for those of you that maybe attended, and to get the sense of what some of the people who use the Orchard Centre had to say about how beneficial it had been in their lives was really, really positive. In terms of challenges, I suppose it's just worth highlighting that with the demographic pressures, we continue to face budgetary pressures, but we continue to monitor that extremely closely as we move on. Thank you.
Okay, Alison, thanks. Can I open it up to comments or questions? Margot?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of questions looking at the different generational age groups. Interested to hear and see about information for younger people with learning difficulties. You know, youngsters that are Saltersgate leave when they're 16, I think. Is there anything in place for them to find support for them and still their families? Because obviously some of them have very complex needs. And looking at work placements for them as well, the partnership working assist with that. And on the other scale is the elderly. You know, and you've also got the carers, the welfare benefits, etc. How is that information put out there so that carers know that this facility is actually, because I didn't know about it, to be honest, and that's a terrible thing to say, because I should know, because it's in, you know, it's in our area. And I also deal with an older people's group in Dalkeith, so, you know, that's the kind of information I could be handing over. NVA, I would presume NVA would probably know about it. But also on the other spectrum is our older people. I was going to ask questions this morning about the care needs for some of our vulnerable people. And obviously you saw things in the press like the WAH have with, you know, 15-minute care in and out, that type of thing. I would hope that that isn't something that happens here when you assess, when people are assessed for their care needs. 15 minutes isn't good to man or beast, I would perceive. So I'd just like your thoughts on those three questions I think I've given.
Thank you. I'll take them in order and hopefully I cover everything that you wanted me to. Within the younger people that are leaving school, we have some transitions work has significantly improved over the last few years. There's always a transitions forum. It's not necessarily that children will leave school at 16. It can be anywhere. But in adult services, we will take them from any point in time at 16. So they might not leave school until they're 18, in which case they would move to adult services at that point in time. We have developed a transitions team within adult services, so we have dedicated social workers who will work really, really closely with the children and families team and with Saltersgate to look at what's right for that individual. And there are things that might be referrals onto our local area coordination service. It might be about more intensive packages of care. It might be about employment, and STEM actually provide the employment services for learning disabilities, so that's within the council as well. So it's very much around tailored to the individual needs. The transition forum actually only happened last week, so from Saltersgate we'll run through every single child that would be due to leave school within the summer for us to map that. But for people with far more complex needs, they might come to the transitions forum a couple of years early, because actually for some people we need quite a length of time to get the right package of care in place. So that work is really improving, and we actually have some quarterly meetings set up just for us to track what's happening with the transitions cases to make sure that we are picking them up at the right time and we're offering the support. That's not to say that we're still getting it right for every single person all of the time. Transitions are an exceptionally difficult time for people, but I think we've really improved an awful lot over the last couple of years, and there is lots in place now for us to do that piece of work. In terms of some of the stuff about carers, I mean, there has been a reasonable amount of information going out about that. We'll look, obviously it hasn't gone widely enough, so I'll have discussions with with Vocal to see if there's something else we can do, and possibly look at including that in things like Inside Midlothian and Midlothian News and things like that, to get that out to all staff. So we'll look at that and circulate it amongst the groups that we're aware of as well, that we have connections with. In terms of welfare reform, we have invested some money that's very specifically around benefits advice for carers. That's only been up and running since June of this year, so we know roughly that it seems to be a popular service at this point in time, but we're not able to report more fully as yet because we need a couple more months just to see what the impact of that is. But we have invested some money, as it has come up as an issue from carers that they are concerned about what's happening. With regard to old people, we do provide 15-minute visits in some cases. What I would say is it's been very, very carefully assessed before we would do that. And our 15-minute visits are genuinely if somebody just requires a medication prompt. So they're not requiring meal preparation or personal care, but if actually all somebody needs is reminding to take a tablet and there isn't another means of doing that. So particularly if someone maybe has dementia and a phone call, there's no guarantee that they can do it, or they've got really significant arthritis, which means that they can't actually open, even if it's in a Dorset box, they can't manage to do that themselves. So we do have 15-minute visits, but they are around medication prompts, and that's all that we would be looking to do. So we're not looking at doing personal care into a very short period of time or trying to give someone a meal within that time. It would literally be for medication. And that's very carefully assessed, so everyone goes through our reablement service and we check to make sure that we've got the right package of care in place for people. I know that had been something that the Church Liaison Group had brought up as a significant issue. We'd done some work with them, and actually a couple of the Church Liaison people had they'd done some questionnaires of in their own right, and actually they weren't getting a lot of complaints from people. It is an issue for staff quite often, particularly at the point it goes out to the third sector for them to provide it, because the carers within that section quite often only get paid for their direct time with the person they're supporting. So if you have 4 15-minute visits, you only get paid for an hour, but it might take you an hour and a half to do that because of the travel time between the 15-minute visits. So in terms of, we're confident that it's not detrimental for the person that is being supported, but there are issues that we're needing to address with how we support staff to do that. And that is mainly with the third sector, not with our own staff. We are reviewing our contracts and we'll be retendering for our care at home contract moving forward. We've got a long lead-in time for that because we want to ensure that we can consult and engage people who currently use services to take part in that decision-making. And those are some of the things that we want to address to make sure that we need to have a sustainable workforce for people as well, and if people are moving on from work because they find some of those aspects really difficult, then we need to find ways to support that. I hope that answered all of your questions.
Yes, thank you. Still no happy about 15 minutes though.
Anybody else got any questions for Alison? Russell?
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Brevity will take place this time. No, just an update, Alison, on how the transition from the old Pentland House into the new care home, and how are the numbers? Because the last time I was there, it's a good number of weeks ago, it was just at the infancy stage, and I just wondered how things were growing and if everything's now settled down.
We've still got a couple of vacancies, but the vast majority of people have moved in. It seems to be going exceptionally well, getting lots and lots of positive feedback from the residents who've moved in. The 5 people who moved from Pentland House into there are doing really, really well. They are really enjoying it. There is still one of the ladies who would much rather that we did her washing for her and did everything for her. So while she was in Pentland House, I think she really enjoyed the novelty of trying out doing these sorts of things, but now the reality of doing that on a day-to-day basis, she's not sure why she should have to make her toast and things like that. But she's managing really well. She would just rather someone did all of the bits and pieces for her. But no, it's going really, really well. We've also set up running a lunch club 2 days a week. That's just kicked off this week. It became really apparent that for a combination of some of the residents within Cowan Court, but also some people in the wider community, that might be something that's beneficial. So that's been run in the dining room in Cowan Court. We'd also been made aware that Broomhill waiting list was at capacity. They were struggling to take on new referrals, so there's a bit of work that's going on between the Red Cross, Broomhill and Cowan Court to look at how we can potentially offer such lunch club placements for some of the people who aren't quite getting to Broomhill as yet. So there's some really good work that's going on there for being in such infancy. We have had to slightly increase our staffing levels from what we'd originally done. There are a lot of people who require 2 members of staff for all transfers, and it was just, you've visited, it's such a big building, the logistics of managing that were quite difficult, so we've increased the staffing on a temporary basis just to see if that's the right staffing level, and we're doing that through Switch actually. We've got someone in Switch on a placement just to see whether it's working well for us, but yeah, generally everything seems to be going really well.
Chairman, can I just say for the record, I think it's a marvellous achievement what's happened up there. I really do think, and it is thanks to the staff who, you know, really pioneered the idea and got elected members to sign up to make the commitment in financial terms as well as in the right thing to do terms. And I do think, you know, working together between staff and elected members, we've really got this one right. And I think a lot of other authorities will be very, very jealous about what we've achieved. So, you know, it's a big thanks for that. And I think it's something for us all to be proud of, because, you know, it really will be a great thing. Once, I mean, it's in its infancy just now, and you're already getting the benefits, reaping the benefits just now, Alison. I really believe that it's going to go on to bigger and better things, and it may be something that we model again for the future, Chairman, for looking at as the demographic changes are coming about, which nobody can deny, not even me. But seriously, I mean, we have got to really be planning for the future, and I think what we've done thus far is a step in the right direction. Okay, there's always more to do, and it's all to do with finance, but at the end of the day, if we can give people that quality of life, you know, that's what it's all about. Thanks, Chair.
I would say that we've had an awful lot of interest nationally from people wanting to come and visit it. So certainly I think there is interest nationally in terms of replicating that. Lynn, who was one of the staff who really did drive this piece of work forward, is now working with the housing associations in our area to look at developing extra care housing in some of our sheltered housing accommodation across Midlothian. So it's about not the swanky new build, but it's about replicating the model of care in some of the existing resources around Midlothian, so that we should be able to see some of the benefits that we're getting in Cowan Court across the whole of Midlothian as we move forward. But I would sort of just agree with what you're saying. I've been really lucky with the staff that have been driving this forward. Lynn, Dawn and Helen have done a fantastic job at making this work alongside colleagues in housing in terms of really getting the right spec that we needed.
Good success story. Anybody else? No? Okay, thanks, Alison. Next up, housing and community safety. Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the last quarter in strategic outcomes, and the strategic housing investment plan for the Council was submitted to the Scottish Government. The Scottish Government requires that local authorities prepare the annual strategic housing investment plan to identify the main investment priorities for affordable housing. Whilst that's acknowledged that there has been considerable investment in affordable housing over the past few years, there is still a requirement to increase the supply across all areas of Midlothian in order to meet the growing number of households who have a housing need. Also in the last quarter, the supported temporary accommodation and the tenancy support services were contracted out, and from the 1st of August, Places for People have been providing care and support through the housing support contract, and the revised specification for the project has delivered what are called pathways now to improve delivering multi-agency support to those service users. In criminal justice, the Risk Management Authority reported on the level of service and case management inventory, otherwise known as LSCMI. This is data that's captured at the end of January, and indicates, as on an assessment tool, the criminogenic potential of those service users. The report stated that the screening version of this process had shown consistency across its use and outcomes, and that indicated the continuity that we would hope for by the use of the criminal justice staff in applying that risk management tool with their service users. In environmental health, in the last quarter, the Air Quality Management Plan had achieved its requirements in path head, and it was agreed at Council to consider this area for revocation, and that has been accepted, and the due process is taking place with the Scottish Government, and I would note that we are the first local authority to be in that position. In community safety, the monthly delivery group and the weekly tactical and coordinating group, otherwise known as the TAC, continues its preventative work and continues to contribute to the reduction in antisocial behaviour and criminality across Midlothian on its downward trend. In terms of challenges for the last quarter and indeed the last year, we've been undertaking the whole systems review for housing, and the outcomes from the redesign of the services has now been mainstreamed across those services, and we are seeing the results presently in terms of the financial savings that were projected and the efficiencies and the improvements in service to service users. The Midlothian Family Resilience Project was originally established in the Community Safety Team. It has since moved in terms of operationally over to Children and Families colleagues. The pilot project is a multi-agency partnership which is designed to intervene in the lives of Midlothian families who have been identified as having multi-generational dysfunction, and those troubled families have been the subject of negative notoriety. Even at this early stage, we're finding that those disadvantaged families are more resilient and have got improved relationships both within the family units and indeed with the agencies who are engaged with them. The people who have been homeless or offending or experiencing serious mental health and substance misuse problems are accessing a fuller range of appropriate services, and certainly they've got intensive work carried out by their key workers who have literally sometimes been in the classroom with them to avoid exclusions. So we're certainly seeing the results of that, and it's giving us the learning to apply across the Council on a one future model basis. Additional resources have been committed to this project through to March 2015 to enable that preventative work to continue and deliver those efficiencies. The final challenge in the last quarter has been in terms of partnership working, and whilst that's come to realisation in recent weeks for environmental health and trading standards, working with East Lothian Council on a management pilot, there was the preparatory work that was carried out in the last quarter for that to take place. Similarly, we're currently looking at the partnership prospects in criminal justice social work, and there is a community justice centre which is dedicated to providing a service to women, which seems an early prospect into the next quarter that we'd be able to report back to members on. I shall pause.
Thanks, Kevin. Questions or comments? Margot?
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment on the Family Resilient Project, I have a wee bit of experience of that through work that I do in my community with young people, and I notice as a pilot scheme that what I've seen already with family support workers, it has to be congratulated, because it is the way to go with early intervention. We talk about early intervention, early years in schools, etc. But this is certainly a useful tool in working with some of our families that, for whatever reason, have got seriously chaotic lives and just need that bit of stability for someone to go in and take some of the strain off them, I think, by guiding them. So I can only commend the work that you're doing in that field, and all power to it continuing.
Anybody else? No? Getting off lightly. Kevin? Okay. You weren't here this morning. Right, moving on to education, communities and economy. First up, is it Joan that's doing? Who's doing children? Is it? Right.
Thank you, Chair. I've brought, for those of you that don't know Joan, this is Joan Trinent, who's the Service Manager East in Midlothian. We've got Christine Schaefer, who's Service Manager West. She's at a training meeting this afternoon. And we've also got Jo Foley, who manages our resources. I just thought I would expose her to this chamber, and so we have to break her in gently. In terms of children and families, one of our priorities that we always have is about child protection. We raise it here all of the time. We've moved forward hugely on it, but for us it's always a challenge. And the challenge is, nationally, we're above the national average for children on the Child Protection Register. And over the last year, we've been at national average, then we've bounced up a bit, and then we come back down. We had, with Scotland, came in to review the work that we did, and we've just got the draft report just last week, and comfortingly, it doesn't tell us anything we didn't know, which is good, so we're not missing anything, but it didn't really tell us anything new. But that's fine, because we were worried why we're having these spikes in child protection, and I think it's, we can put 2 families on the child protection register, but it's actually 8 children. Do you know what I mean? And it just seems to be the way that it goes in Midlothian. So that's quite comforting for us. The Getting It Right for Every Child policy is firmly embedded, and we're just awaiting the final report from the inspectors, but they have commented on Midlothian's implementation of the policy, and the fact that our staff on the ground are very comfortable and know about the named person and lead professional. This is not the case in Scotland. There's still tensions and arguments, but the inspectors have commented strongly on that. Again, we're just missing our targets, but we have set ourselves ambitious targets, and we had an argument with inspectors about that, because they said, well, you're missing your targets every quarter. And we're saying, yeah, because we set ourselves 100% targets. And they're saying, well, you're missing it. And we're saying, yes, but we've set ourselves that target. We want to be the best we possibly can. And do we set it at 80 and always hit our target, or we accept that 75% is good enough and it's not good enough? So our targets are high, and they're high for a reason. Again, the continuous improvement, the inspectors read our case files, and they read 97 case files, and they reported no significant concerns. Now, Joan's here, and she'll tell you there are areas we need to improve in terms of our file recording. If we've done a visit, we should be recording it right away. Risk assessment, make sure risk assessments are up to date. A child that came in 3 months ago would possibly need another risk assessment today. And it's making sure that these type of things are up to date. But there was no child that didn't have a care plan, and that was good. Following the positive inspection, our fostering service continues to maintain children locally, and you know that we invested heavily in our foster care, and we have reduced the numbers of children who are fostered out with Midlothian. And I keep saying I'm going to get stickers made for cars. A Midlothian child is a Midlothian child, and it's quite funny. This is now being repeated back to me, which is great. We want to keep children as far as possible in Midlothian. I did raise at the last meeting that our fostering and adoption were inspected by different inspectors at the same time, and our leadership in fostering came up as good, but our leadership in adoption came up as weak. So it was 2 different inspectors inspecting the same team. So there was an anomaly there. However, we've worked with our inspectors to look at that. We had divided the team because of the focus on fostering. We divided the team, one section of the team looking at fostering and one team looking at adoption, and we weren't as strong in the adoption service. However, we're working on that at the moment, and it's not just about that team, because the adoption is what is preventing children moving on. Do we have the right reports to the children's reporter? Do we have the right permanence panels? Do we have the right decisions made for these children? So it wasn't just about that team. So if it hits the press, we've got a press statement ready, but it's to look at the fullness of the adoption journey for a child. Again, the residential findings, what we're doing is we're going round our services and doing reviews of them to make sure we're on the button, to make sure that we're not missing anything. And again, we looked at the 6 children who had gone into residential care last year. That was 6 children at primary level. That was unusual. So we've looked at the journey, mapped the journey of these children, and for some children it's the right thing. For other children, we need to be looking at our services in Midlothian and keep in the back of our mind a Midlothian child's a Midlothian child. Again, Dalkeith House. So we've opened Pennycook House, which is opposite Cowan Court. We've got Gorebridge unit and Dalkeith unit we're using as a base to actually try to keep children out of residential care, because we could fill these 4 beds in a minute. But what we're doing is we're getting the staff that work in this unit to work out in the community, to work with families who are having trouble with their youngsters, whose youngsters aren't coming in at night, who are worried about their daughters' behaviours and things. So, and because we're using that in a different way, we're able to help a lot more families. So that's working really well. And again, just the new units are absolutely fantastic, giving youngsters, ensuite bedrooms. I mean, it's just fantastic, and it's fantastic that investment was made in these units, because no other local authority is doing it like that. We wanted the best for our children, and it was investing the money on, smaller units for youngsters. In terms of the challenges remain child protection. We will always have that as a challenge for us, and we're working through that. So it's both an issue that we're proud of. Joan's worked really hard with the team in terms of reducing the child protection figures, but it's always going to be a challenge to us. And the other challenge is staff absence. We have a number of staff who have long-term illness, and we need to then cover that absence. So, a child in a residential unit, if 2 people are off sick long-term, and you've got a series of locums coming in, it can be quite disruptive for them. So that's always a challenge for us. I've already spoken about the out with authority placements. We're looking at these. We're quite clear. Our language has, this child is £1 million child. If this child goes into residential care now, it's going to cost the authority £1 million by the time they're 18. What can we do differently? So we're being quite robust in our challenges with our staff. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Russell?
Not so much a question, Chairman, but certainly a couple of comments to the Director. I mean, I don't think, Director, we should make any apology for our Child Protection Register and the numbers that are on it. I mean, they're on it for a reason. And I'd rather err on the side of caution than miss something and then it blows up in our faces. And I think we've got that absolutely right. I mean, you just wonder what others are doing out with Midlothian, that they don't seem to have a register that seems to have the same amount of people on it. And it's the same, getting it right for every child. We made a policy commitment a number of years ago that we were going to do an investment programme to ensure that we started as soon as we possibly could from the time the child was born practically, to ensuring that it might take 20 years before that all comes to fruition and that child's grown up. But nevertheless, by investing at the beginning, you actually get dividends later on in life. So I think two policy areas where we drove that policy through. And I actually believe it will work in the longer term for us. And it was great to see that somebody comes in and has a look at the cases, just randomly looks at it and says, hey ho, you're actually doing a grand job of work. And I think that's terribly important. So I mean, it's just more power to our elbow that small changes in a small authority can be big dividends. And I think that's the message we've got to keep on saying. Just on the one thing about the £1 million child. We've agonised over that a number of years, Chairman, as you well know, and particularly at budget times, when you look at it and you see the amount of money that's going out the door, when in actual fact it could have been reinvested to providing a better level of service. Is there any way, Director, that we can deal with these, I suppose, the authority, the receiving authority? Is there any ways that we could we can deal with that to get a better joined upness about that, or is it all in our backyard, so to speak, that we have to resolve it? I just don't. I don't know, because I can't get my head round. You know, it costs the child. The money goes with the child, and I accept that. But is there any other kind of partnership working or whatever that we could do that would kind of lessen that burden on, as I say, particularly a small authority? Because that's the key to it. You know, if it's a larger authority, you can't hide the money, but it's a lot easier to redistribute the money, let me put it that way. Whereas in our case, I mean, it's in your face and you can't get away from it.
Thank you, Russell. Actually, we're doing a lot of work. We're part of the national contract, so previously we were a minnow compared to Glasgow or City of Edinburgh in terms of placements, so your negotiating powers were very limited. We are part of the national contract for fostering, adoption, residential and secure placements. So we signed up to that, we're part of that. So that's helpful. In terms of the budget, the investment that's been made over the last few years has proved dividends. So at the moment, the way that we're working, and because we're doing the preventative work, and I'm always a bit nervous about this, but the way we're doing the preventative work just now, the way that Joan and Christine and Joe come to me and I say no, we're actually sitting at the moment with a large underspend. And that's because of a foster care placement. A foster care placement externally was £54,000. A foster care placement internally is £18,000. So we've invested in our foster care placements. Jo Foley, the Service Manager for Resources, she's working with the family placement team looking at respite carers. So you may have families who say, I couldn't do foster care, but could they take a child on a Wednesday afternoon for their tea and a Saturday afternoon to the football? You know, on a fortnightly basis? Could we provide respite for families who've got children with disabilities who just want to do things with their other family members, you know, go shopping, go to Marks and Spencer's, you know, whatever. So we're looking at respite care. Again, that will save money. So if we can invest in these sort of things within Midlothian, then that will, prevent this going out. So there's a lot we can do. I think in terms of budget savings, I think for us it's about not cutting it too fine. It's not about saying, great, we've underspent, we'll take that money back. It's how can we invest that in schools, in education, in residential services, in the Family Resilience Project to prevent these crisis referrals. Because once you get a child in a unit or in foster care or whatever, it's really difficult to get a child out. So we're working really closely, and we're also, despite being in different divisions, we're actually closer now working with adult services in terms of our youngsters going through. So as Alison said, in terms of respite, we're now working with adult services from a child's 14. So that child probably won't leave school until they're 18, but we're starting the planning really early so that the families know what will happen as they move on. So there's lots going on, and we're trying really hard. But, tomorrow, last Monday, week past Monday, we were looking for 4 foster placements. It can change like that, over a weekend. So I'm always a bit nervous about, we've got an underspend, but we're going in the right direction.
Sorry, thanks. You didn't mention, and that was, I'll ask you anyway, this whole kinship care thing, it's not going away. I mean, to be perfectly honest, nobody's really grabbed it and says, let's get a resolution to it. I mean, we've tampered with it, but I mean, again, it really needs a national position, a national solution, I suppose I'm going to say. I mean, where are we any further on with really looking at that and knowing that the role that these people do play?
The Children's Services Bill has got a bit in it about kinship care, and that's under debate at the moment. Midlothian, again, as a local authority, we pay our kinship carers what we would pay a foster care allowance. So they don't get a full foster care fee plus allowance, but they get the full foster care allowance. So we have a good number of kinship carers, and in fact our kinship care has remained steady, about 35% of our looked after children. So that's remained steady over the years. So the Children's Bill is looking at that. We have a number of kinship care groups in Midlothian, and they appear to be competing with each other now, which is a bit of a shame, because the 4 groups together, working together, would have given us and given them a bit of pressure. But what's happened there is one of the kinship care groups has broken away from the other one. So we have Midlothian kinship carers, we have Midlothian Dalkeith kinship carers, we have Mentor, an organisation that's come into Midlothian, and we also have Sure Start. So those people together would have been a good group. But what I've asked Kath to do is actually call a meeting between the 4 groups, because what they're trying to do, and you'll all have been party to emails because I've seen it, they're trying to play one off against the other, and I think we need to have a concerted view about how we deal with kinship care, because some of them want money, some of them want, you know, me to be at every meeting, they want Joan to be at every meeting, they want foster, you know, so it's really difficult. We've got limited resources, but kinship care is definitely in the Children's Bill. It is moving forward. Some local authorities are moving to giving them a flat fee of £50 a week. We don't do that in Midlothian, but I don't know what will come out of the bill.
Anything else, Margot?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, I can't go away without saying something about Dalkeith House in the Maloney area. I have visited it, seen the staff and seen the excellent facilities that are there for children. And it's good that the community itself have kind of come around to it now, because initially, which I expected there to be a bit resistance against it, you know, all the bad children, all this kind of thing. And thankfully that hasn't happened. And I haven't heard any really bad news coming from it, to be honest. My main worry at the time was not the children that were in the home, was the children outside the home, just trying to cause disruption. But I don't think that's happened either, which is very good. I'm really pleased to hear. The other interesting part is your service review identifying lack of support for vulnerable children. Can you give me a meat on the bones of what type of thing you're looking at?
Okay, go on, let Joan speak.
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I never heard you properly, sorry.
You mean you weren't listening?
Yeah, I was concentrating.
It's just that your service review is obviously throwing up issues for lack of support for vulnerable children, and you're obviously looking at working things in the near future. I just wondered what type of things you were looking at that would have helped these vulnerable children and their families that isn't already there.
I mean, again, just like the With Scotland report, there's nothing there that we don't already know, but we've done a development slot this morning and Christine's at it this afternoon. It's looking about universal services getting in there quicker as well. You know, it's not all about children and family services, and we need to do a much more joined up approach. Obviously, with GIRFET coming into play, we are looking at health visitors and school teachers who are the named person taking on a much bigger role, to be quite honest, in the future, and this is something that we are supporting them and working towards. Things that came, the focus of the development session this morning were, you know, identifying younger parents and looking at universal services like Sure Start and all the rest of it coming into play. And again, when we were tracking back this morning, a lot of these things weren't around 8-9 years ago when these kids first came to our attention. What I have to say, and amongst all of that, is there was lots and lots of good work that was also going on. A lot of it at universal services is offered, and what we didn't see is parents saying no to that. But what we do need to identify is that once we start to see a warning sign, i.e. a part-time timetable or describing a child as having difficult behaviour, that we all need to be aware that that's actually telling us something else, and it's not about, you know, the wee one all the time. It's about looking at the family situation and actually pulling that together a lot quicker and getting a robust plan in place to take it forward. So we know all that, you know, we do years of training and we know that, but what we need to do is make it effective on the ground and to figure out, you know, to build these relationships, because fundamentally what the Family Resilience Project is showing us is that what's key to everything that we do is relationships. So it's about skilling the staff up to ensure that they continue to try and persevere with these parents who often choose not to work with us. Okay.
That wasn't so bad, was it? Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Anybody else? No? Okay, right. Thank you for that. So we move on to communities and support. Are you doing that, Olga? Yep.
Thanks, Chair. I'll just give a brief talk through some of the highlights. I'm starting with the early years collaborative. That's going well. That's where this is a national initiative where we look at small ways and tests of change, ways we could change things within the early years agenda, if you like, little things we can do. That the idea is to think big, start small, and then scale up fast. How we can, as you said, little changes can make a really big difference, and that's what we're looking at doing. So it starts from pre-birth, when a woman is pregnant, right up all the way, different work streams to when they start school. And funnily enough, which we'll report further in the next quarter's report, they've actually added another work stream, which is from the start of school to P3 or year 8. Anyway, what we've done is it's a collaborative that we're doing with East Lothian and the NHS, and what we've done within Mid Lothian, we've really looked at the tests of change that we're doing and culled some, stopped some, started up others, and really revised them, and they're going very well. The big sleep that was really highlighted, also referral pathways, for children going to places like Hawthorne. And it is going well. We've got a lot of the third sector, the voluntary sector on board, really engaged, and that's very good. And that isn't replicated across all authorities, so that's actually quite good. We've got them quite committed to it. We've also got the schools involved more now, which is also very good. You'll see from the detail, one of the targets that we missed was to do with the early years literacy and PEEP coordination, and that's because the one we had left, but we've now recruited a new one, and the lady, Ginny, she's actually going to start looking at expanding the PEEP sessions in the Mayfield and East Houses area, which is an area of deprivation, and these are areas where they're really needed. Still staying on with early years literacy, we had 923 children and 717 adults attend the book bug sessions over during quarter 2. This has also been very positive because a lot of them have been attending in areas where we really feel it's needed and where child literacy isn't so good. We had 1,000 children participating in the Summer Reading Challenge, and this was bearing in mind that Dalkeith Library was closed for a while because of refurbishment, and Bonnyrigg Library was also closed, this is over the summer, because of the decant to the new library. So despite that, we had quite a lot of people coming in, and we keep pushing the early literacy there. We were successful in getting grant funding of over 20k, and this is to create an online database for about people of Mid Lothian that were involved and killed or injured during World War I. And the idea is that this will go on till autumn 2014, when to coincide with the anniversary of the start of World War I. So that was due to, as part of a competitive bidding process, and we're very pleased about that. We had the successful implementation of the pilot of the knife crime initiative, and this has been delivered to a number of high schools and other services such as TOPS and Y2K. And this is part of our program to engage children, young children, well, not so young, older children to, I suppose, stay away from crime. It's part of a series of videos and seminar-type projects, if you like, that we've been working with the children throughout the summer and after that. And in terms of the knife crime project, I think it's quite, poignant, if you like, bearing in mind what happened a few days ago. So this is trying to catch them young and does support the positive destinations, because obviously if you're in jail, it's not really a positive destination. So we try to do that. We're very pleased that the adult learning classes have been really gone up quite a bit. The significant increase of 125% in some of the classes, and some others by more than that. So again, we've got more of an online presence. We're really pushing it through various avenues and working with partners to remind people and to tell people and promote people that there are so many ways that you can carry on with literacy and numeracy. In terms of the other things, such as the school estate, we're very pleased to say that over the summer, following negotiations, that the BAM invested in £300,000 in updating various aspects of the Dalkeith Schools campus. You know, and if you've been there, the dining hall, so many other areas, it's actually been very good. And bearing in mind this was not planned, you know, a few months before that, so we're very pleased that we were able to get that amount of them. And we've got a lot of positive feedback from both the staff and the pupils there. We also invested 1.1, or you invested £1.1 million in schools over the holidays, and a lot of schools across the council were updated, from roofs to toilets to windows to flooring to health and safety aspects to playgrounds, and it goes right across the piece. And we're very, very pleased because some of the schools were in dire need of updates and refurbishments, and that took place. Rosewell Primary School as well, that's ongoing. We're on track now. We've more or less finished the refurbishment. The extension is going on. It's been delayed a bit, but it's better to get it done properly rather than to rush it through. The Laswade High School, they finished the build in Q1, but the decant actually took place in Q2, and that went as smoothly as could be expected. You know, the various, not just the school, but also the libraries and CLD. And so in terms of challenges, we've got one of the challenges here, which is Integrated Support Service Project, and it's just trying to make sure that whilst we're looking to centralise service support, we make sure that we don't sacrifice the service that is provided to frontline services, and to make sure that the provision is as sufficient as it is at the moment. The server of the library management system is nearing the end of its useful life, and is actually presenting problems at the moment. A business case is being prepared and will be submitted for funding, and because it is something that we do have to have. A couple of others. Yes, and these are just internal challenges. You may have had some feedback about some delays to youth work, and some of the youth work, some of the things we had said, the street work that we would undertake during the summer, and just after as well. There were delays in recruitment there, but I'm pleased to say that we've got the staff in now, and you will see a lot more activity on the streets, on your streets in the evenings and weekends in terms of youth work. And just to let you know that the Directorate has been receiving an increasing number of subject access requests, more so in this Directorate than the rest of the Council, so this requires a lot of time and money to make sure that we do answer them, and of course there are legal requirements that we do that and do it robustly, so that's just to say that we've noticed the trend there. So I'll stop there for any comments or questions.
Can I just ask what a subject access request is? A personal, like an FOI for information about yourself? Yeah, all right, okay. Yeah.
Chairman, there seems to be a renaissance in library use, and I'm not asking you to look at a crystal ball, but I mean, do you on the ground have is there any reason why we seem to get more people back to libraries? I mean, many years ago it seemed to be going the other way, and there was a concern about had libraries, ended their real use. But as you say, you've the book bug programmes and things like that, you're actually getting adults coming in and participating as well. And I just wondered, is there any one thing, or is it a combination of how libraries have become attractive again?
I can tell you, and I've told them themselves, so I'm not just telling you, it really is the staff group. They're one of the best bunch you'd get in terms of dedication and really having a vision of what they're there for. They love the libraries. When I go to their meetings, I say, at what age do you decide you want to work in a library for the rest of your life? But they're so dedicated to it, and they keep on top of it. I mean, I've been to some of the national conferences they have, and it really is about, you talk about crystal ball, it's all about looking into the future. How can we keep this relevant? And because they're so open that way, for example, it's not just about books, but they work with MELDAP to provide recovery cafes. If they know there's initiatives about healthy living, they make sure they stock books on mental health and counselling, things like that. If they know there's an issue with the economy, which they are, they stock books on starting up your own business. So they make sure they're relevant, and then some, to the communities they live in. Science Week, they go out, find out what do people want to do, from making bath bombs to talking about neuroscience. They're really cutting edge in that respect, and they're not shy in partnership working. They will work with anybody, you know, that they can, in order to bring what they can. And I think the only thing that stops them is finance. You know, they have the ideas, the creativity. You know, you could be working with them evenings, weekends. They're really there doing it. And and a lot of the money, a lot of the things they do, they get a lot of external funding to deliver a lot of what they do. And I suspect if they had more time in the day, more money in which to do it, you would see a lot more. So they make themselves very relevant to the community. They start from the community and then work outwards in terms of what they deliver. So, and it works very well.
Ogo, sorry.
Yes,
it was the part about the sessional part-time workers. Is that my pass? Street workers you're referring to here? Is this,
some of them, and some of them are also like that, like adult learning or tutoring. So it could be on anything from speaking, learning to speak, you know, English as a second language, to criminology or whatever. Right. They do that mostly during the term time.
Yeah, but this isn't specifically about my pass.
No.
Street workers, they work with the kids in the streets. And
yes.
Right.
And some of them do. The street workers do it mostly evenings, weekends, where they can get there. But they're casuals as well, so
yeah.
It's the whole casual recruitment.
That sort of makes it difficult, is it, keeping it going? Because it is part-time, usually students, or...
Sometimes, and sometimes we actually do have staff that are already working in other areas, like they could be CLD workers within Midlothian, or CLD workers that work in Edinburgh, but live in Midlothian, and want, you know, are quite happy to do a few extra hours, but they have to be recruited as casuals.
Right, it's just that I know that in Pennycook, I mean, the local police sergeant and myself we're working with the skate park users and trying to get them organised and into, you know, working as a group and committee and all that. But then unfortunately she went away for a while. She was a student. Someone came in to replace her. Then she went away, and then Natalie didn't come back. So there's no one there now. So the thing's sort of on hold, you know. And
I'll let the team leader know, because you should still have access to somebody that could keep it going. Yeah. At least somebody that there's always.
Yeah, I've had a link with one of Hamish, the street, you know, but we've no one at the moment, I think, by the sound of it there, so I'll maybe catch up with you later. Right, thanks.
Anybody else? Nope. Okay, thanks, Ogo. Now we're on to education, Mary.
Thank you. Peter McNaughton sends his apologies. He's at a head teachers meeting today, and the priority for me and for Peter is really to improve the work we're doing with schools. So I thought it was important that he was at that meeting rather than this one. So you've got me. Again, Peter's commenting on the Early Years Collaborative, because it goes through all of our services. This isn't just about one service, it goes through all of the services. And specifically the preparing for the increase to 600 hours of preschool education. So that work's ongoing at the moment. And Joan alluded to the GIRFEC agenda, previously from 2008, has been seen as a social work agenda, getting it right for every child. And in actual fact, it's a universal service. So we've been developing packs to be working with schools about their role you know, as named person and lead professional. So there's a piece of work to be going on with that at the moment. The assessment results indicate above average scores for reading at P4 and P7 and results are above average for maths at P4 with an improving picture at P7. And the SQA national qualifications in S4, 5 and 6 displayed some areas of improvement. But we're aware that although they showed areas of improvement, that the gap between other local authorities and ourselves is still there. So we are improving, but not as much as other local authorities, or indeed our family groupings, I think they're calling us now. Improved pathways for learners. We're working with Edinburgh College and to maximise positive destinations for young people in Midlothian. And the Academy's work has continued to develop between the two organisations. And they're now working with Edinburgh College to explore plans to introduce a similar academy approach for engineering. So that work's ongoing. We're waiting on the figures from SDS. We've not had that as yet in terms of positive destinations. But a whole lot of work has gone on across all of the services. So positive destinations doesn't belong to school, and neither does it belong to Alistair Mathers. It goes through us all. It permeates through the organisation. Continue to deliver positive and sustained destinations for young learners. A considerable amount of work in our secondary schools, much of it centred on the engagement of both secondary head teachers and senior leaders. Guidance staff is crucial in ensuring that these young people are engaged in positive developments and even after they leave school. So traditionally it's the youngsters leave school when they come back after the Easter break, and that's it. That's their engagement with school finished if they get to 16, but schools have been following up on that. And both OGO's report and this report, I'm laughing at it because we've got two lines to a £38 million school opening. Lastwade High School Centre opened to young people in August as planned, and the school community led by the new head teacher is embracing opportunities offered through the development of this excellent resource. And I thought there would be bells and champagne and whatnot when this came down, but no, that was it. So, that was a huge piece of work, again, across the authority and across services to get that opened on time and working as well as it is. There are teething troubles, we know that, but it's a fantastic building. Emerging challenges, the challenge that we've given Peter is about raising attainment and achievement of children in Midlothian, and that's really what I want his focus to be. He's visited to all secondary schools, met with the head teachers and school group managers to look at the results, to be saying, what do we need to do to improve this? He's going to design the whole approach to attainment. He says it's kind of old hat, we just talk about raising attainment. What does that mean? What does it look like? What does it taste like? What does it smell like? And people really have to embrace that. And this is what Peter's really working on with schools. Work has been taken with Education Scotland to explore how we can develop and shape a concept of partnership agreement. So instead of the inspectors coming in and inspecting the schools, giving us the results and walking away, what he wants to really embrace is this partnership working. I think that's called poacher turn gamekeeper. Don't minute that. The most recent results from our standardised PIP scores present a continued challenge. So on entry to primary 1, the youngsters are measured on their reading score, and we're off target in reading and maths. At primary 7, our scores are above the national trend. The recent figures are down on our annual target. So there's a lot of work to do. So, Peter's really focused and driven on moving this forward. In terms of exclusions from school, we've had a higher number of exclusion incidents in primary schools in Q2, and we're taking measures to address this. And that kind of fits in with what Joan was saying earlier on. In terms of the review of the youngsters, the 6 youngsters who went into residential care, one of the key things was part-time timetables. So that's something that we're really exploring with our schools. I'll pause there for questions.
Russell?
Just a question on the attainment. Suppose starting at primary 1 would be the best part to start at, or it's actually nursery, and we never used to get reports coming up of any inspections in our nursery schools, and we did get a couple up, and they looked pretty good. So you would actually sit back and relax and say, aren't we doing well? But that doesn't obviously show up in the figures there. So there's obviously quite a bit of work to do, certainly in the nursery sector, to ensure that when the kids do come into primary one, that their reading and maths or arithmetic or whatever it's called nowadays is actually up to a reasonable standard coming in there. It's the same at the primary 7, Chairman. I've been banging on for this for years, about how our kids used to get their assessments going before they left primary 7 to go into S1. And it ended up in a situation whereby you test them at the end of S1 and they've gone backwards. And I was always banging on about this for years. How is it that a kid can be doing quite well at primary 7 and going in there and mum and dad or their guardians are saying, oh, this is fabby. And then, a year later, they've actually regressed, not progressed. And there seemed to be this disjoint between when you leave primary and go into secondary, then there's something didn't happen. And we worked pretty hard at that, if I remember correctly, by engaging the primary teacher with the secondary teacher and vice versa. And I just wondered, has that work continued to be done, and are we reaping benefits? And how does that reflect on when you now see the results there that have actually kind of gone, we're good, but we're actually not as good as our targets? Now, obviously, we set these targets because we thought we'd get there, hoped to get there then, more than if not thought, but probably thought. And I just wondered, both on the coming in at the front end and going out at the back end, about, have we identified, or has Peter in his new challenge of coming from the dark side into the enlightened side, has he actually now started to look at and to see if there are solutions for that? Because clearly, again, just picking up on what we've been saying all afternoon is getting it right is getting it right. Thanks, Chair.
I think that's quite a complex question you asked there, so I'll try and answer it in bits. We've done a small piece of research. One of the leadership groups, we were asked if we were doing a service plan, because we know the elected members love our service plans. We were asked if we were to come up with a joint service plan, what would it look like? And there was 8 of us round the table from different departments. And I was saying, right, if we take early years, what would we do? And people sitting around the table said, well, we don't work with adults. We don't work with children, we work with adults. Choose an easier one. Anyway, from the 8 of us, we decided to choose one street in Midlothian that had a number of data sets and a number of postcodes. And we looked at that street, and the bottom of the street ended up being really good, quite an affluent area. The other side of the street were a lot of elderly people, and the middle of the street were our young people. And interestingly, that group of young people started school with a reading age lower than their average. And that was just a bit of research. It was 2 two-hour sessions we had. So there's something about how we engage with people. Now, Ogo talked about the number of people taking part in the reading challenge and things like that. But are we targeting our resources, our limited resources, appropriately? How do we engage the parents in that middle part of the street in getting children interested in reading and things like that? So it's about, we've got finite resources, it's about how do we target them. In terms of youngsters going down, there is that bounce effect when you go into high school, because it's a different way of being taught. You've got a whole range of different subjects, you've got a whole different way of working. You've got 8 different teachers who teach in different ways, whereas you've had your primary teacher, sometimes you're lucky if you've had them 2 years, sometimes, in your final year. So there is always that bounce effect. But at that end of first year, that's when we lose our youngsters. So they may have coped really well at primary because they had really good teachers who, kept them occupied, who, were really good at minimising the behaviours and whatnot. And then it becomes more difficult when they go to high school. And that's when we lose a lot of youngsters. At the end of first year, that gap becomes too wide. Peter is looking at that. So, he'll be looking at all of these things and not accepting well, that's the way it's happened in Midlothian, and, you know, we've tried for years. He's kind of saying, well, this is what we've got, how we're moving forward. So I'm very confident that things will move forward, and it won't just be the same, you know, this is attainment. You know, this is what we're doing about attainment. So have I answered your question?
Sorry, Chair, that's fine, because, no, and the point is that we've got, that's the kind of areas we really do have to look at. Now, I think we all recognise limited resources, it's where do you put it, you know. I wish people, for example, there wasn't as many attending the book bug classes because that had been picked up earlier, but you're having to do that to firefight because something's been missed. Now, it's about how we get from a transitional, I suppose, about catching that early doors and pushing it through. And I mean, you know yourself, well, you'll recognise yourself, I mean, some of these young families now, even in good salary conditions, they actually put the youngsters to private nursery because it's pre-3, which is pre-statute. And I mean, it costs an absolute arm and a leg. So they tend to, oh, we won't we? Now, we all know that the best start in life is to get people into that kind of structured way of education early on, and it reaps the benefits later on, you know, where they go from, where are they going to go when they hit 18. And it's just about getting that right. And that's why I'm really I didn't realise, I hadn't thought about it as that drop being this, you know, the challenge of having 8 teachers as opposed to 1. I hadn't actually quite caught up in my little head about that, but I do see that maybe that's something that we're going to have to try harder at pulling up on, because once you lose that child coming into teenager level, you lose them forever, and it really is difficult sometimes to get them back. So thanks very much for that.
One of the other things you commented on was about nursery reports. Every nursery, including our partnership nurseries in Midlothian, have got good or above in terms of their gradings from inspectors. So, you know, there's a lot of really good work going on in Midlothian in terms of our partnership work. And for some reason, there was a policy decision not to bring all of the nursery reports to council. I don't know why, because for me it's the same as any other service that we deliver. But we decided we were bringing them just to let you see what's going on. So in terms of early years and in terms of universal service, so that you can see what's going on. Mayfield Nursery just got excellence. Hawthorne Children's Centre was excellence and very good. Do you know, and these are a really, Mayfield Nursery because it's got the specialist provision, and Hawthorne because it's, you know, our families that are really vulnerable. So it's fantastic work going on at early years. So we've asked ourselves the same question. What do we do to these bright wee things that run down the road with their big school bags and whatnot? What is it that happens to them? So, yeah.
Anybody else? No. Okay then, thanks for that, Mary. Moving on to the final paper, which is a report, sorry, is Ian Johnson on planning development.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the overall planning position, and I'll just take you through some of the progress on that. The Strategic Development Plan for South East Scotland was approved by the Minister in June of this year. In approving it, he said that the 6 councils that make up the CES plan area had not provided for sufficient housing over the period from 2012 to 2024, and he asked the 6 councils to produce some supplementary planning guidance for him to look at and hopefully approve. That guidance has been prepared by the 6 councils and approved by the Joint CES Plan Committee, and it went out to public consultation a couple of weeks back, the closing date for that being just before Christmas. In terms of the additional, the split of additional housing provision, whilst for some districts it moves into the thousands, for Midlothian it's just 100 units, which is a minimal amount. And one of the good things about that, and as long as the Minister approves that supplementary planning guidance in those terms, it means that the strategy of the Midlothian Local Development Plan is then not knocked off course. It means that the main issues report consultation on the Local Development Plan, which took place over the summer, remains completely valid. 2,100 representations received on that. There has been an initial report to Cabinet and to Planning Committee on just informing about the nature of that. There are now programmed, or will be programmed, members' seminars at the beginning of next year, January into February, with a view to the proposed plan coming out in spring next year. That's the second statutory phase, and that's the point at which, in essence, the authority is saying, here is the plan. If you don't like it, you need to formally object. So it's not a consultation stage, it's this is the plan. You'll have had your chance over a long period when the main issues report was being consulted upon. The terms of that plan obviously will need to be decided through those member seminars and then eventually through formal council approval. What I would say in passing is the housing market remains quite strong in terms of house building in Midlothian. Just a quick think is that there are some 10 or 11 big sites which are continuing to produce quite a lot. We're looking at sort of 500 output per year or so in Midlothian. So, and it is an area which is built through the recession in some ways. Some sites like Hopefield actually never stopped, which was pretty heartening. So it's a strong market. That market, obviously, and that building activity is one of our most important economic development sectors because the multiplier effect of house building is very strong in relation to other trades and also picking up, even though it's with big national firms, they pick up a lot of subcontractor work as well. So it's quite important for that. Which takes us neatly on probably to the Midlothian Economic Recovery Plan, which is in preparation. There's been a very comprehensive programme of consultation over the past, 6-7 months, involving various groups, interested groups. We've been to a great many people, and we've had very good feedback from that. That document is due for finalisation internally, and then to go through the process of governance through corporate management team, and then on through the various parts of the council. Ultimately, we'll be looking probably to seek approval, formal approval of the Economic Recovery Plan in February or March at council. Just to say, the world is not waiting for this recovery plan. What you'll see in there is actually a focus on what we're already doing. So it's not as if somehow something's on hold. Just a brief word on those two documents, because the nature and the way in which they'll be cast is clearly going to have a relationship to the overall corporate priorities of the council. So some of those ones which we talk about, positive destinations, early years, economic development and business support, those things will be strands that we try and pick up in some clearly demonstrable way in those sort of documents, and also meshing those documents together so we've got some sort of continuity and some complementarity. Just to pick up on a few other things, the bush development area, which is absolutely critical, and which you'll have seen is the subject of a recent report in Cabinet on with a business improvement district. But picking up on the Bush Development Board, just a reminder, the three sponsors, that's the Council, the University of Edinburgh and Scottish Enterprise, put money in to prepare a Bush Master Plan, which was approved earlier in the year. A product of that is the Bush Development Board, which I'm pleased to say met for the first time in August. And it has all of the main players, in fact all of the players at the Bush on, and we had a very, very useful meeting. And what was interesting was that there is a tremendous amount of intent on the part of people there to keep on building, to keep on developing, and there is money there to do it, particularly with the university. The key issue is that of infrastructure constraints, potentially, particularly roads, but there are others as well. And really the focus of that board at the moment is on identifying and seeking to troubleshoot potential infrastructure constraints, and the council will play a major role in facilitating that. Shorefare, the sale of the land, that's the joint lands of what used to be Shorefare Developments Limited. So that's the lands jointly owned by City of Edinburgh and Midlothian councils. Those, the sale of that land has been concluded. Date of entry is early next year, and at that point, that's when the initial sum of £3 million to each council will come in. But over and above that, the agreement is that as development continues, then there'll be a creaming off of a receipt on the land deals, which will come to Midlothian Council. The Section 75 negotiation is virtually complete. I realise I've said that more than once, but it is very much getting to that stage, and I've every confidence that we're going to see something completed in the next few months. There has been the major application at Cold Hall Moor, which was approved last week, subject to conditions and to finalisation of a legal agreement. I think the legal agreement will probably take 2 to 3 months to conclude. I think there's a fair wind with that. There are rumblings of a legal challenge, but we'll just need to wait and see whether any objectors wish to pursue that formally. And if so, then we'll obviously have to just rebut that and deal with it when it comes along, if it comes along. Regulatory services continue to perform well. Building standards is meeting all of its targets on a regular basis, and that's heartening. In development management, dealing with planning applications, there has been further improvement, which has been happening for a number of years now, but particularly in the major applications, which is heartening. And there's now, I would say, very high performance on householder applications, which is heartening, because that's often where people only have 1 or 2 experiences in their life of dealing with the planning department, and you want to make sure that if they do, then at least their applications are dealt with properly and they have a proper customer experience. There's been the launch of the Gorebridge Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme, and I'm very pleased that the project manager who's been dealing with Dalkeith is now, that's Rod Lugg, is dealing with Gorebridge. If anybody can make a success, he's the man to do it. It's interesting to note that, in fact, Historic Scotland have chosen Dalkeith for their sort of national convention of THI and Conservation Area Regeneration Scheme people. They want to actually come to somewhere that's been particularly successful, and Dalkeith is one that they regard as a success. So we have every expectation that we're going to try and do the same with Gorebridge. Just to pick up on areas of concern, because I think it's important to note that, time taken to deal with Section 75 legal agreements is still slow, slower than I would want. To some extent, that's partly because the margins, the development margins for developers have been squeezed, so they are really pushing every last opportunity to try and bear down on their contribution requirements. But there's still work we could do internally. I think our opportunities to do proactive work on biodiversity and conservation area appraisals is limited at the moment because of other priorities and just the resources we have to devote to that. We're still pushing very hard, Scottish Government and BT, on the broadband rollout, and that's quite an issue at the moment. Everything tells us now that the programme for Midlothian is in the second tranche because the European funded districts are going to be going first. So, as previously advised, we're looking at 2017 or 18 for completion of the broadband rollout here in Midlothian. And the last one is really just one we need to keep an eye on, which is encouraging and promoting the take-up of industrial land. Whilst it's fine in terms of the bush, and we see other areas coming forward, it is very slow. It's a product of the recession and the outcome and getting out of that. But we do need to be careful about a lot of pressure for allocated industrial land being put under pressure for housing. You'll see the application in, or the due in from Letts, which was to develop the balance of their site. I know there's now going to be pressure on the Laidlaw and Fairgrieve building to go for residential. You'll see Buccleuch's comment on the local plan pushing for Salters Park to be residential. We let the former Ferranti site go for residential, and it's just making sure that we don't end up with a portfolio which is too constrained, and that's one area which we just need to keep an eye on, which needs to be certainly looked at as part of the local development plan. Other than that, Chair, that's pretty much a run round things. More than happy to pick up on any of these.
Thank you, Ian. Anybody like to come in? Comments? Russell?
Thanks, Ian. It's just on the Bush Master Plan in particular, and I mean, I know the Chief Executive and I have been very proactive many years ago in trying to ensure that people did come to the table, because the opportunities are just mind-blowing there. They really are. And I mean, we talk about our kids for positive destinations. I mean, they really could they could be doing something there, because it's not just about all the top level, PhD jobs. There's a lot of other jobs out there as well, and we should recognise that. But it's the one thing, Ian, that does worry me, because if we are successful, I know we've got in our issues report about the alternative road network out there, but it's about the delivery of that. Now, you can build all the houses and factories and retail units in the world, but whether you're going to have the wherewithal to actually deliver on that infrastructure is still questionable. Is there any way that we could go back to the Finance Minister and see if we can get some gearing where government could forward the money, and then there's a payback thing with development? I can't remember the blinking name of the thing. You know what I'm getting? That's right. I mean, they've just signed that off, as I understand, down at Grangemouth, and that looks like that's going to, well, apart from that wee bit iffiness that happened with some company down there, leaving that aside, that's now settled, and it looks like that'll go forward. Now, for my mind, I mean, if we've got anything to shout about, it's what's happening up there at the bush. And, I don't want to lose the momentum, because there will be jobs and more jobs coming there in the future, and really good quality jobs. Now, we're going to be attracting people to Midlothian by residential development. What I genuinely don't want to happen is, as soon as they get there, they jump in their car or on a bus, hopefully a bus, and go back into Edinburgh to get the job. We should be hopefully bringing the jobs out there with the residential. I know it's easy to say, it's not easy always to deliver, but I'm just wondering if it's worthwhile looking at us going back with some formula that could unlock some capital money that would allow us to start that development. And I mean, I know the university are dead keen to get things happening, as indeed the Roswell Institute are, and I just wonder, if we hesitate, we could lose what is really a really good news story out there. I just wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Okay, just a few thoughts on that. Certainly, the ensuring there isn't a transport constraint at the bush is clearly in the minds of Transport Scotland, and the message has got through somehow. I think it's partly the fact because the enterprise area is in there as well, and I think we've seen something of a slight change of mood amongst Transport Scotland on quite a few things, and that's on one of them. That's not to say that the issue is not still there. Clearly, in terms of strategy, then the local plan is proposing, and I'm expecting probably it'll continue to propose at the proposed plan stage, the major new road, the A701 realignment, right round to the A703 round about Seafield Mill, and then the potential for spur off to the A702, which would deal with the problem of the junction on the current junction, which is very difficult on the A702. This council tried to get that road scheme as a national project, or to get it into the national planning framework, and it didn't get taken up. It was just seen as a regional or a local thing. We certainly, through the master plan board, what we agreed as an action was that the various organisations, the university and others who have expansion plans at the bush, would identify those to us over, so what they're looking to do over the next 10 to 15 years. And we've started to get a database together of that. And what I said is that I would take that forward in discussions with Transport Scotland and say, look, this is the way this is going to build up. You need to be aware of this. We need to look now at solutions for making sure we don't get stuck halfway through this programme, particularly when research money with time limited coming into the university, etc., is going to get stuck. So that's the programme. Separate to that, so just making sure, it's just officers and members present. Separate to that, the MSP Colin Beattie asked for a meeting with me last week. He's clearly being pressed as well by the parties down at the bush. What's being currently looked at is the spur road from the A703 to the A702 could be identified as a first phase. It could be identified on its own. And what he said he would be prepared to do is to make noises up at Holyrood in relation to the potential for that particular piece of road maybe to come forward at an early date as a possibility. And certainly the likes of David Hume and others at the Bush are very keen to see that sort of thing happen. So just to give you an update in terms of, so you're fully informed, that's a more recent development, and I undertook to prepare some sort of information to provide to the MSP in relation to that, because I just felt that was something which, was a Midlothian issue which could be promoted very much in the interests of all concerned.
Margot.
Thanks, Chair. I was quite disappointed when you mentioned about Salters Park. They're looking at trying to revise their stance on residential as opposed to industrial, because there won't be any industrial land in our area if that ever went ahead. The other issues is always, I've banged on about it to yourself on many occasions, Section 75 contributions going towards, yes, okay, the infrastructure, etc., and the border railways, but none seems to go into community facilities. It kind of just goes into the mix. It doesn't go into specifics in an area. And I know that the 3 elected members for Dalkeith met and was trying to progress the hub again. And I think that this time we might be successful through various processes. So we're pleased about that. But it's trying to ensure that the various developments that are happening in our area, you mentioned obviously we can't say anything because it's not a planning situation at the moment, but it just really trying to reinforce to yourself and your team that we need to kind of strengthen the issues about community facilities. I mean, in our area, the breadth of housing is just really getting too much, in the sense that there's no community facilities at all. And even at the campus, the school campus, there isn't a lot of get the facilities out with school time, as I've kind of argued with directors of education in the past. But it's really just to try and enforce your Section 75 agreements on community facilities. And I'm sure other members have the same sort of grievances, that there's never enough goes into community facilities in their areas, yet there's all these housing getting built.
In terms of, just to say that, in terms of Salters Park, in discussions with, ultimately that it's a member's decision as to what happens, but in discussions with Buccleuch as an officer, I've said that the notion of Salters Park being totally residential is simply not acceptable, and that will not be acceptable to the council. If they're coming forward with an argument for potentially a mixed-use scheme, which would see a substantial amount of employment land released and some of the infrastructure constraints overcome on the back of a residential arrangement similar to Ash Grove, then there's no promises on that, but that may be something that they might want to consider as putting forward rather than simply putting forward a whole residential scheme. But I've clearly not given any comfort to Buccleuch on that. It's entirely a matter for, at the end of the day, for members to decide. But looking at options potentially they might want to come forward with. In relation to the community facilities, there is the issue, I think, in that particular locality, and I know we've discussed this before, Councillor Russell, is that it's the unfortunate nature of there not having been a particularly identified community facility to say to developers, right, you'll need to contribute to that, rather than just making it a global thing. I think in terms of any further housing that comes forward through new local plan or whatever in that locality, I'm assuming that there will be a clearly defined opportunity to contribute to a community facility. Now, I know that there are various options currently being looked at in the Woodburn and area and the wider area, and all we would need to do is just be able to identify with some clarity that there would be a community facility consequence of any additional new housing development, and then we would simply put into the local plan the requirement and run that through the planning guidance.
Anybody else want to come in?
Just briefly, you've heard me banging on before about chauffeur, and I'm glad to see that the completion of Section 75 is now about complete. But as it stands, the new Shawfair is a building site, with the new road, the new spine road going into the back of the park and ride, the railway, and they seem to be digging up half of Midlothian to get to this track. And I sometimes wonder why they didn't use the old track that was there in place. But anyway, that's another story. But also in the area, and it's not to do with Midlothian, but your team keep myself, Margot and Jim in the loop with what's happening on the other side of the West Road. And obviously there's work taking place there also. There's development, I think it's for 116 houses, which was initially rejected by the planners in Edinburgh, but it was overturned in appeal. And there's also, I believe, a crematorium and a graveyard going in there and all. But will there be any implications with the development? And I think how Big Edmiston will go. But it's basically linking up Midlothian with Edinburgh, because all it's going to separate them is one road. And I don't know how far that will go down to Nirjabil, whether I can't take away the parts. But will that have any effect on the South East Wedge, the development taking place in there?
Short answer is, I'm not expecting it to have a major impact. I mean, the road improvements that are being taking place on the Wisp is in accordance with the planning permission, as you say, for development, housing development at that end, close to sort of Coalcoats area. There are a number of applications and pre-application consultations with Edinburgh. I know for a fact that certainly at officer level, many of those applications are not being looked upon favourably. They're seen as hostile. Now, whether we will, depending on what the outcome of all of those, but certainly the area that the sort of Dander Hall end of the Wisp, if I can put it that way, the sort of Boscobel area, that's always been intended to be regarded as somewhat sacrosanct, as the only sort of upland bit of green territory separating Midlothian from Edinburgh, or from the Bio Quarter and the hospital. So we've, as a council, this council has been consistent in resisting and objecting to development on the Boscobel area. It really just remains to be seen how well the line can be held. Of course, there was a pretty unfortunate appeal decision against Edinburgh on the housing development, and in fact the reporter went into making comments about sort of South East Scotland as a whole and issues to do with the residential land supply being short and the need for districts to find more land. He took it upon himself to make comments in that respect, which I'm not sure were that helpful. But it shows the sort of pressure that Edinburgh are under for new housing, much more so than Midlothian. So it's not guaranteed that even if Edinburgh can resist that sort of additional housing, whether they'll manage to be successful in resisting appeals.
Okay, anybody else? Right. Okay, if that's the case, we've probably shaved about 7 minutes off of the time that we took this morning, so keep Martha down as a success. Thanks for your attendance.